Hey y'all, welcome to 1322 Life. I'm so excited this week because we have a special guest. Her name is Arielle Deane, and I'm just happy to have her here with us. Arielle is an innovation executive, host of the Independent Mom podcast, speaker, and mother to an adorable daughter. However, her greatest accomplishment is in innovating her life. After being laid off while 7 months pregnant, woo, child, I don't even want to know how that felt. Um, she struggled financially until God helped her see the importance of managing and stewarding her money, not just making more money. Today, she has paid off over $25,000 in credit card debt, increased her credit score over 150 points, and is the owner of a multi-unit real estate property. Through her podcast, she inspires and equips moms to own their finances, reimagine their motherhood, and live a wealthy life with or without a partner. She wants all moms to know that it is never too late to turn your money story and your life around. So welcome, Arielle.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Yes, I love your story. It's so powerful. And it's great to see that like you really got serious about your finances to get rid of that debt and then to not only do the bare minimum. So you got rid of your debt, you increased your credit score, but then you also started investing. So with your multi-unit, is it fourplex, duplex, triplex?
It's threeplex.
Okay. Awesome. So you have a triplex. That is amazing. So just start and share your journey with us. 7 months pregnant, laid off. That's
Yeah. So I always tell people because I feel like, especially right now when there's murmurings of layoffs, my story I would say was interesting because I had the itch to leave my job before I got laid off. And I kept being like, well, I'll hang around. I don't really like what they're doing. I don't really like this anymore, but whatever. And then when I found out I was pregnant, because it was definitely a surprise, I was like, oh, well then, I'm going to stay. I'll stay on. I'll make it work. And so when I got laid off because the company at the time was being acquired, and I even remember like sitting in before they laid me off and they're like, so do you think you're going to come back after you have your baby? And I was like, this is a really strange. I mean, I think they all ask that now, even though it should be outlawed in my opinion. But they're like, do you think you're going to come back? And they're asking all these questions. And I was like, yeah. And I had this inkling inside, but I will never forget when the day came. And it was like after a holiday, and they took me up to one of the conference rooms. And I was like, oh, they must just be, talking about a new project or something that's coming up. I just had no clue. And so when they said that I was going to have to be let go, the first thing that popped into my mind was, oh my gosh, like I am like, what am I going to do about my baby? Luckily, I don't know if it's luckily, but like gratefully, I did have my insurance up until my baby was born, but essentially after that, I had to go on Cobra or whatever it is, which is like super expensive. And at the time, so as I said, it wasn't planned. I was not married. And so I ended up having to move out of my apartment. I was living in the heart of downtown Chicago in a high-rise building, not thinking. I mean, I was definitely I was investing in my retirement and I was spending, but I wasn't like going crazy spending, but I wasn't making a ton of money. And I was definitely living probably above my means because all of my friends were making probably way more money than I was. And so it just hit me and I was like, I'm going to have to go and move and stay with my daughter's father. And he lived miles outside of downtown Chicago. I used to walk to work, then I had to take a train and a car. Like it was just such a burden. And so it took me a really long time because in that period, all I could think about was, okay, how do I make more money? How do I make more money? How do I make more? So I did consulting a little bit and I do a few things here and there. And so what's interesting about my story is I actually started to make some traction. I got a new job. I was making more money and I thought I would be fine. And what happened was I was at this new job and I was like, okay, like stuff has been rough, but I'll be fine now. I've got this job. I'm going to keep making more money. And I went into work one day and I opened up my email and there's an email from the corporate credit card team. And the email was like, Arielle Deane, your application for a corporate credit card has been denied. And I was just like, denied? Like, what? Like, I couldn't, like, I had never in a million years thought that not taking care of my actual credit was going to impact my ability to get a corporate credit card. And I knew in that moment, I was like, oh crap, like everything is going to start falling apart. And that is when I ran to my car because I was like, I have to hide. I have to go somewhere safe. Like, if anyone sees this, if anyone sees me, like, how am I going to explain this to this new job? My new manager, I won't be able to go on trips. I won't be able to pay for dinner. And I was sitting in the car and I just started crying. I started bawling and I was like, God, like, how is this still happening to me? How is this still happening? And that's when God said to me, new things can hide what's broken on the inside. And I had been trying to get every new job and every new hustle and every new thing, but I wasn't actually fixing the reason why I was spending money, the reason why I was being reckless with my money, all of those things. And so God, I think, really sort of sat me down and helped me get honest and serious about my situation. All the things I was hiding, I was pretending like I meant to get pregnant. Like, I was doing all sorts of things to try to hide what was happening with me. And so when I finally got honest about that, I was like, okay, I get it. What do I do? And so that's when I asked God again, like, how do I get out of this? How do I do this? And he just said to me, what are you doing with what you already have? And
Mm.
I didn't get it at first. And then over time, I just kept asking myself. And that's when I started really getting on this journey of learning more about finances and money management and trying to really be a better steward of the money that God had already given me. So long
Mm.
way to answer your question, but that's sort of the way that it got me to this point.
I love that. I love that. Thank you for sharing. And that is just, it's very important to deal with that. Like, a lot of people think that when it comes to finances, it's like, oh, I just need a budget, or oh, I just need this. You can have a budget and you can throw it out the window and never follow it. You can sit down
Mm-hmm.
and do all the motions of everything and never actually implement any of the things that you've learned
Yes.
and get nowhere. And the reason why is because you have either trauma or some kind of problem
Yeah.
that's stopping you from dealing with your, like, finances properly. You
Mm-hmm.
it's like, maybe it's like it's a trigger, and it's like, this is how I go to make myself feel good, is I go shopping, I go spending. Or maybe it's insecurity issues, and it's like, oh, I have to keep up with my friends or with my circle or with my peers because I don't want
Yep.
anyone to look down on me or think that I'm poor. And
Yep.
it could be, for some people, maybe they grew up poor, maybe they grew up and they didn't
Mm-hmm.
have, and then now they're adults and they're like, I'm going to have it all.
That's true.
And
Yes.
and so they spend every last penny trying to have it all and end up with nothing.
Yeah.
Because you're paycheck to paycheck, there's no room to breathe, there's no room to actually save or to prepare for a rainy day. And there's so many of us that are just like, they say that like, I think over 80 or 90% of Americans can't even afford a $500 emergency.
That's right. Yeah.
And that's insane to me.
It
Like,
is.
$500, like,
It's
that's that's
crazy.
a car breaking down.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like,
It
that's
is. I
wrong
mean,
with it.
and it's true because I feel like, especially because I came out, right? And I made a decent amount of money. And so once you get used to that, you just kind of think, well, there'll just always be a paycheck, right? Like, I didn't think I
Mhm.
was spending extravagantly. I just sort of was like, and but having a kid, right, is a much bigger expense
Oh yeah.
than when you're taking care of yourself, right? Because I could not go to a few dinners and that would save me, a few $100s. But when I have a child, she's got to eat, she's got to have diapers, she's got to go to daycare. Like, the expenses were just insane. And I didn't have a system or a process to keep myself accountable and to keep myself moving in that direction. And so that was a big part of what shifted for me.
That is awesome. Now, what about when with the corporate credit card? So, did you need it for your job? So, like, you had to apply to be on your company that you were working for a credit card?
Yeah. So the way that my job work is typically, like, if we're gonna go, if I do a work trip or if we have a work dinner, I have a corporate credit card that's in my personal name. But I mean, my job basically pays it on my behalf, right? Whenever I can expense something. And so it was basically like the first few days, right? You sign up, they make you get the corporate credit card. And then my boss was like, well, once you get your card, then you can go ahead and you can start booking some of these other meetings and travel. And I was like, I don't like, what am I going to do? I can't tell her I didn't get approved. And so what ended up happening was I put things on my personal credit card and I just kept saying, oh yeah, like I couldn't get through. There was a complication with the corporate credit card office. And it was just like, it was like this mounding stress of trying to hide and trying to make up stories and trying to pretend. And that's when God was like, you gotta let it all go. Interestingly enough, though, I did like, that was the fire that lit little spark or sort of like really ignited me into being like, I have got to get a hold of this, right? I think when it was just affecting me, right, I felt like I could still hide it, I could still keep it from people, but professionally I had always been on top of things, right? Like I always went to great schools, I was always the achiever. So the thought of it affecting my professional brand was really what I think made me be like, oh my goodness, like this can really start to affect you. And it was also a realization that it was all on me, right? Like it wasn't just the fact that I had been laid off and I couldn't keep putting all these excuses on everybody else as like, oh, this is why this is happening to me. It was like, no, this is you. And you're going to have to figure out how to get yourself out of this. And that is a lot of what drove me to get a lot more intentional about my money and my spending.
So did it cost you your job not being able to get that corporate credit card, or did you ever come clean and tell them that you got denied?
No, actually, I'm sure they don't even know to this day. Because it didn't cost me my job because I was able to basically work around it. I was able to pretend. And then in very short amount of time, I got very, very serious about figuring out how I could get just enough things off of my credit to be able to still qualify. And so I started getting super zealous. I was doing selling things on Amazon. I was just looking for anything that could help me get some of this debt off or remove any sort of late payments. And I had a bunch of things. I had a condo from years ago that I had done a deed in lieu during like 2008, 2009, which is basically like the one step before foreclosure. Essentially, you basically give the deed to your property back over to the bank before they foreclose on it. Because in 2008, I moved out of state to go to business school. And I couldn't get, I had a tenant, but I was still trying to pay my condo fees, which is why I'm like adamantly against people getting condos. And so that cost me that property for the most part. And so that was on my credit, but it was supposed to have fallen off. And like there was a lot of things that I had never even paid attention to. But that was sort of the beginning of my wake up call to move in that direction. But thankfully, no, it did not cost me my job, not at that moment.
Okay. Well, praise the Lord for that. Like you already went through enough with being laid off at 7 months. Like,
tell me about it. Yes. It had been a rough, few years leading up to that point. And those are all of the things that I think God was sort of like, you've got to really sit with some of these things. So it was a tumultuous time because I mean, years before that, I had a fiance who passed away suddenly, and then sort of met my daughter's father and thought like, okay, like I'm back on a path. And then it was like, oof, like you're back down in a ditch, right? And so it just was this constant cycle of things until I could get really clear and honest about all of it. And I think that's a huge part of getting on a proper money journey is like clearing out all of the things that maybe you're buying to hide or to your point earlier, to try to appease what's going on internally. But when that can really be cleared out fully, I think it allows you to be open to the abundance and the goodness and the discipline that you need to think about your money.
And I just want to thank you for your honesty and just like even sharing that openly, because a lot of people are embarrassed about their past with their finances or the troubles that they went through. And I mean, I've even had people where it's like they're writing a review and they're like, if I tell them that I started saving X amount with you, they're gonna be like, oh, he was just throwing away money, or what were they doing with their money? And I'm like, look, it is okay. Like, you just don't know how much other people are being affected by the same things. There are other people that have a whole lot of debt. There's other people where maybe actually their credit score cost them a good job.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
possibly be fired. There's other people that have, dealt with being a single mother or, unexpected pregnancy. I dealt with an unexpected pregnancy for sure. So, and having to navigate that, and each of our journey is just that of our own. Like none of us are perfect, and we all have hiccups that come along the way where it's just like we have to navigate that, and each story is different. But
Totally.
I appreciate you being honest about it, because the fact that majority of Americans cannot afford a $500 expense,
Yep.
and that means that majority of Americans are not handling their money well.
It's true. No, I think it's definitely true. And I think there's a lot of people who think as long as I make six figures, as long as I make this certain amount of money, I'll be fine, right? And that is not the often I think it's worse, right? Because it's easy to mask that you are managing your money. But when something really happens, like that was, I think, my scenario, you realize how much you're not and how detrimental it could actually be.
Yeah, and I think also COVID taught that to a lot of people. There are a lot of people that were making great money, and then all of a sudden they got the rug like pulled from underneath.
Yep.
And they lost their good jobs, their six-figure jobs, and like pilots especially. And they had to come to the reality that, oh my God, like nothing is certain.
Nothing. That's right.
And I didn't plan for this. I didn't plan for my finances at all. And I just and because I ignored them, I'm hurting right now. And I'm like, some people were on the brink of homelessness. Versus if they would have taken care of their finances, they could have been sitting pretty the entire time, and the pandemic not affect them, or them losing their job not affect them. So it's just like how we handle our money today will definitely affect our tomorrow. And sometimes poor money habits catch up and bite people in the butt the same way that good money habits can be there to be a nice soft cushion for you.
Yeah.
So how old is your daughter?
She is 7. She is 7, probably going on 17. But she's got lots of personality. She is 7 now. So it's been about 7 years or so. Yeah.
Okay. So you've been on this journey for quite a while. And
yeah, I mean, it's funny you talked about COVID, because during COVID, I was furloughed for about like a month and a half or something from my job. And I remember thinking to myself, when I was in this position years before, how detrimental it was. And actually in 2020, I think I made more money, because what I ended up doing is I ended up consulting, and I already had like cash flow. And so I actually wasn't, it was like a completely reversal, right, of the last time this happened. And so it was just such a good reminder and indicator, right, of like, look at all the progress that you've made, that like you were furloughed for a month and you're like, I'm good. Like, this is fine. And I actually ended up finding ways to increase my income more during that time. And so I just think, so it's been a journey for sure. Yes.
That is beautiful. I love that, because I felt guilty during COVID. I'm not going to lie, because I heard about all the layoffs. I heard about all the other people hurting. And I was like, all I did was lose expenses. Because now my kids get to stay home with me, so I don't have to pay for daycare or aftercare or any of those things. I still have my job. My husband still has his job. We're making the same amount of money, and actually and I'm saving on gas. I don't have to go anywhere. Like,
I know.
COVID was
great.
It was awesome.
I mean, COVID itself was bad.
Yeah.
100%. Yeah. But yes, it was. Like, I saved a ton of money, just like not commuting, not paying tolls, not paying gas. I mean, yeah, it was.
And the daycare and before and after care was the biggest for me. And being able to be home with my kids. Now, I also learned teaching my own children is not my ministry.
Yeah. I mean, I definitely have to say I was super, super blessed, because the school my daughter goes to, they were in school almost for most of COVID, because they had like a super outdoor area, and like each of the classrooms were on their own little, like small little schoolhouse. I don't even know how to describe it. And so we were out, I think, the beginning of COVID, right? Like, I think everybody was out, but by the following year, she was in school, and I was like, thank God. I could not do homeschooling. That was just, that was not my ministry at all.
And that is beautiful. And like, see, for me, my oldest, so my daughter I had on my own, we are a blended family. So my oldest, she was in private school. So
Mm-hmm.
she was basically in school the entire time. There's like
Yeah.
10, 13 kids in a class. It was like no one caught COVID. No one got
Yeah,
taken off
same. They were
the
so
entire time.
lucky.
And she
Yeah.
was in school every single day, except for when it first broke out. So like that
Right. Yeah, I was gonna say very
summer
similar. We
period.
had very similar. Yep.
Yeah, but after that, when it started back up in August, it was like,
Yeah.
see you
I
later.
know.
Love
I
you.
felt so bad. I was
Bye.
like, I don't know how people did that for years. I
Yeah.
mean, yeah, it was, it's unbelievable.
I had to do it with my middle two because we're a blended family. So we actually had to fight to be able to finally get them in private school. So now all of our kids are going to private school this school year
Yeah.
coming up, praise the Lord. But
Yeah,
they
that's
were in
amazing.
public school. And public
Yep.
school was not open. And then they were at a public school where the teacher just like checked out. Did not
Oh,
hear from her for a week.
wow.
When
Hmm.
COVID first started, and then being told that you got to get some of these packets and stuff done last minute, where it's like I've been doing my
Hmm.
own thing with her. Now I gotta get caught up on these like 108
Yeah.
packets from the dark ages, and it was like a hot mess.
I
I was
know.
like, oh my god, I can't do
I
that.
know.
Like it was. I
It
was
was
just
brutal.
yeah. My mom's a teacher. I do not want to be
Um,
one ever.
Mm-mm.
Like
I definitely couldn't. My sister thing, my sister, well, she's not a teacher anymore, but she used to be a long time ago. And so with my niece, it's funny because you say it, because I feel like there was this huge influx of people who ended up going to private schools, I think,
mhm.
after COVID. Our school, they said they hadn't had the level of enrollment since like 2008 or something crazy after COVID because everyone was just trying to get in. But she like there was definitely a period of time when she pulled out her like old teacher self and she had the lesson, like she was doing all out. And I was like, your homeschooling looks very different from my homeschooling. I was like, maybe we should put the cousins together and you can just teach both of them because our household is not going so well. So it was quite
I
funny.
love it.
Yeah, I was like, I wish I had taken more classes on how to teach kids how to learn things because it did not work well.
And see, I'm great at homework time. And it's not like I don't understand it. It's just the frustration that comes when they're
Yes,
not
it's the
getting it.
frustration.
Where it's
Yeah.
like I don't know how many times I gotta walk away and come back and be like, let's try this again.
Okay. Yeah, exactly.
Let's try this
I know.
again.
It's like, okay, well, let's try a different approach. What if I do it this way? I think too, just like when you're the mom, I just feel like it's just a different situation, right?
it
Like my
is.
daughter, she just doesn't like it when I push her out. She's like, I understand. I'm like, okay, all right, okay, you understand. We'll try something else then.
Because it's like, all right now, sassy. All right.
I know,
Really, I'm
exactly.
getting on your nerves now. Let me figure
I
something out.
know.
Like,
I'm like, oh my goodness. I want you to be empowered, but not against me.
yeah, I love it. I love it. Yeah, that's one thing that I was like, okay, I don't
Yeah.
care what these teachers want. I don't care what supply they ask for. I always was like, I'm gonna give you all the things you need anyway. But now
Hmm.
it's like, how can I go above and beyond for these people? Because
Yeah.
take these kids. I don't want them at home with me.
True. I
Like,
know.
I love the time home with them where it's like I can play, we can go on
Yes.
walks, we can do fun stuff together.
Yes.
But it's like anything more than just homework, it's like, no, thank you.
I know.
I don't
I
want to.
know.
I don't want to.
I know. And it's just hard, right? When you're still trying to juggle work and their
Yeah,
need, right? And then they're like, oh my gosh, mommy, why are you always working? And I'm like, well, I work the same amount of time normally. You're just not here. And so it's
exactly.
like a different, but yeah, it was rough for sure.
That added mom guilt for sure. Like, oh, you're here and
Mhm.
I'm not able to spend time with you because I have to get this work done. And I was like, I had my
Mhm.
office set up, and then I had like a kid here and a kid here, an iPad,
Yes.
one on a Chromebook, and like
I
I'm just kind of
know.
like, and then I'm hearing the teachers, and then I'm trying to
I
get
know. I'm like
the
running over. I know.
and
That was
like
the
also
worst.
be on
Oof,
top. It was such a hot mess that I was just like, oh
it
my
was.
gosh,
Yes,
over.
it
So
was.
yes,
I
didn't mean to go
agree.
on a COVID rant, but
Yes, yes, I know.
but yeah, that is so. Tell me about how long was it before you went and got your triplex, and also for it to be in the Chicago. Are you still in the Chicago area?
No, so I lived in Chicago for about 10 years. So then we just moved right around COVID. And so that was really I mean, one of the things I talk a lot about is, and this is always a hot debate for people, right? Is like, do you pay off all your debt or do you get investments, right? And so one of the things I started to look at was I would say, like, I could put this money towards paying off debt that's like at 4%, or I could take advantage and I could buy into something that I know is going to probably grow and appreciate, and then I might have access to even be able to pull from that money, right? Whether I refinance or cash out refinance, or just take, when very early on in getting that unit, you're not going to get a ton of cash out of it in terms of that. But being able to sort of use that and know that, hey, if I decide to sell that, that's going to make a pretty good amount of money, because I knew sort of where the market was and where I was able to buy it. And so I would say it's hard to say exactly probably where that was in the journey, but I definitely went through credit card debt first, right? Because I talk a lot about how I do believe credit card debt is the worst one, because it is almost impossible to get rid of if you don't get after it very aggressively, and they are under absolutely no incentive to help you get out of it, right? So credit card debt is the worst. It also negatively affects your credit score often the most compared to other things, right? So I always say, student loan debt is bad, right? But it doesn't really hurt you from doing a lot of things. Student loan debt doesn't carry over to your children. Student loan, right? Like, you could pay student loan debt for 50 years if you wanted to, and the government would let you. I'm not recommending that.
No,
I'm just saying, right? Like, that debt is different, right? And I think we do have to understand how to think about debt in different ways. And I always say to people, like, people have no problem spending $400,000 on a home. That is debt, right? That has a 5% and 6% interest rate. But yet, people really freak out when they have like some student loan debt. So long story short,
there's a difference, because I feel like when it comes to a home, that's an asset that can produce you more money. And when it
eventually,
comes to,
yes.
Well, eventually, if it's your primary home, immediately if it's a unit that you're renting out, or it's a
renting out, correct, yes.
And so when it comes to that, it's definitely an asset for me versus student loan debt. One, you can get the same education at 40K, 100K, 300K, and it's going to have the exact same effect. And people like to go for these 100, 300K amount of debt, where it's like, that's very necessary and uncalled for. Majority of the time, getting a master's degree is going to cost double what your bachelor's costs, and you're not going to get even nearly that kind of raise. Majority of fields. So it's just like a lot of the student loans, it doesn't have a high return on investment. I have a college degree,
Right.
I got both of my bachelor's. I double majored in accounting and finance. So do I believe in education? Yes, when it's necessary. And for my field, I'm happy with having my bachelor's. Am I getting a master's? No, I'm a CPA.
Yes, exactly.
I don't need to spend 40 or 60,000 additional dollars, or 80,000 additional dollars to have MBA next to my name too. And so I think that people really get into also just like Black women, especially us, we love our degrees. Some of us,
that is so true. I know. Yeah.
Being so educated, and we are very educated. We're very smart. But we're going into 6 figures debt.
It's true.
Ultimately, what I feel like is no reason. It's pointless. Like, we could do a lot more with less. Like, we can make a lot more money with just getting a lot of experience and getting the minimum degrees, like a bachelor's or something in that field, and then letting them. And if they want you to get a master's, let that job pay for it. I'm gonna go.
No, I think that's. there's definitely a lot of. I definitely cannot knock. I know a lot of people with law degrees who make a lot of money.
Oh, that's different. That's different,
right? But I'm just MBA, right? Like, I think coming out with my MBA, I probably 3 times my income of what I was making before, right? But I agree with you to an extent that I do think we tend to think that we have to have all of the degrees, right, in order to be able to do certain things, right? And I do think in certain circumstances, right, like, it does give you access to spaces and places that maybe you wouldn't have those opportunities to do otherwise, right? But I think we're much more, like, to your point, I think we are much more open to going into 6 figures of debt for education, which I always say, I do believe anytime you invest in yourself for education, that to me is the best ROI. because the more you invest in yourself, no one can ever take that away. No one can ever devalue it, right? It always allows you to make more opportunities for yourself, to meet people who can bring you to opportunities, to create partnerships. And while real estate, I think, is huge, right? Like,
Yeah.
I had real estate in 2008, and a lot of people had real estate in 2008 and ended up with nothing, right? And so I agree that to some extent, buying a property, right, is an asset. It will most often appreciate, but it doesn't always appreciate. And even in those first few years when you buy any property, while you are making money, you're not yet profitable. Because if you think about the amount of money you'd often put into purchase, to upkeep, to property manage, right? Like all those things, it's usually technically a few years before you're making your full on profit back, right? Depending on where you live, right? And depending on what the units look like, right?
And
How
also
big.
your strategy behind it too. Because there's
Yes,
just
for
different
sure.
ways you can do that to take all of your money back out of it, like the Burr method. So like
Right.
when it
But
comes
that
to
still
real
takes
estate,
time. That's not like immediately.
but a lot of people can do the Burr method sometimes within 3 to 6 months, or like if they're very.
I guess so.
And so, but it usually doesn't even take a full year and it just depends on what your strategy is, right?
And the interest
So
rates, right?
that interest rates, strategy, how you plan to go about it, that all makes
Totally.
a huge difference. Right now, while APRs are at 7%, it's like, whoo, ah, I don't want to
Exactly.
refund nothing.
Exactly.
But when
Yes.
we were in the 2 to 3% range, it
Yes.
was crazy phenomenal returns. And then so it's just
100%.
like timing is important. What the
Yes.
market is doing is important, but having proper strategy in place and knowing what risks you're willing to take is important as well. And just like the same way every single real estate property doesn't appreciate, there's people with doctorates that are waitresses and that aren't making
Yeah.
any.
No, I
There
think
are
that's
people that,
definitely true. Definitely
have
true.
$300,000 degrees and
Yes.
they're not worth it. They're not worth it $10,000. So I
Yeah.
mean,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, it's great that we can get education. I think it's very important to be educated, but you can also get an education for a much lower price. You can also
Yeah.
go
Yeah.
read those same textbooks for $100 or less, or rent it from your local library. You still have the knowledge in your brain, whether you got a degree next
Yep.
to it or
Yep.
not. So you can still do the things. You can still be educated on it without having to spend $80,000 to say that you want to do it. So I
Yeah. Yeah.
always look at creative ways to do things, because I definitely looked at like the MBA curriculum, and
Mm-hmm.
I've noted all their books and went ahead and got them. So
Yep.
that I could be
Yep.
like, oh, what one of these will actually help me with what I'm trying to do in my spirit,
Totally.
and let me go do that. Other
Yep.
than
Yep.
let me go ahead and pay you guys another 60, 80,000
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And
for
I think too, right? It depends, I think, also on what your ultimate end goal is, right? Like
exactly.
some people, if you do want to go and work in corporate America, right? And you do want to be an SVP, like lots of times you do, right? Like I went to a school where like there were certain jobs that didn't even come to other schools, right? They only came to our school. Certain companies,
Wow.
right? They would only come to the top 5 business schools, right? Just because
Gotcha.
of the caliber, right? And so like if
Definitely.
that is right, if that's what you want to do, I think it makes sense, right? To go where you think it's going to get you there the fastest, right? Like there are definitely times when I
Yeah, that
stepped
makes
into
a ton of
rooms,
sense. That makes
right?
a ton of
But
sense,
to your point, like if you feel like, hey, I'm going to be an entrepreneur, right? Or I'm going to do this other thing, you probably don't need all of the accreditations and accolade, right? Because a lot of that is about getting you into the room, right? It's about getting you access, right? I had never met people who had built, $1 million companies until I went to business school. I didn't know people who worked for Warren Buffett until I went to business school, and so you end up meeting people and being in circles that you just can't get access to. And I do think sometimes for Black people in general, a lot of our struggle is we don't have access, right? We don't
that
have
is so
access
big.
to the
There's so many barriers.
information. We don't have access to the way that the wealthy do things, right? And so it's when you get access to that, that then you can be like, okay, cool. Like now I got how this works. I can take this on
Mm-hmm.
my own and I'm going to twist it and I'll do it in a different way. But I do think it's funny. My sisters and I were talking about this the other day. Like, I think for like my parents' generation, that was a big part of it, right? A part of it was just understanding, how do you even build wealth, right? Like, what does that even look like? Because for so long, we as a people were basically not given opportunities to build wealth, right? And so I feel like they were the generation that like sent us all to the schools and had us all get tons of degrees, right? And we all did that and came out, you know, super achievement, right? Making hundreds of thousands of dollars. And now we're all like, huh, like we did all of that, but I don't know if I love what I'm doing, right? And so I think this is the next level of having the flexibility to be able to change, right? And switch and do something that is more of our own than something that is, you know, just following in that corporate or being an attorney or, you know, I have so many friends who are lawyers and they do. I mean, I'm not going to lie. They have very, very, very beautiful, comfortable lives, but it comes at a price for sure.
It does. It does. And that's why I think it's about everyone. Like, what price do you want to pay? Also,
Exactly.
like, how much of your time and energy do you want to have to give? How much, like, what do you want your life to look like? Because a lot of us have just been sold the American dream. So
Yep.
the American dream says you better go to college, you better go get a good corporate job. You stay with that job, it's going to give you great benefits.
Yep.
Maybe if you start getting a little snazzy, you know, oh, I'm going to go get me a better raise by switching companies. But you know, to get better benefits and raises faster.
Yep.
But that's pretty much what you do. You get your house, white picket fence, dog, and have kids, and you're good to go. And so that is a path. That is a legitimate path that people can take. But also I'm seeing that path to be more so for just like my generation and a lot of us to say, like, no, we don't want that. Like, say I want that job. Like, I don't want to hate Mondays.
Exactly.
Mondays. Everyone's hating what they do from day to day.
Yep.
And even though I ended up having like my dream job, so to speak, it still wasn't the job that I really wanted to do. Like, that's what made me create my business, was because I couldn't find what I'm trying to do, such as building wealth and teaching people how to do that. I couldn't find a way to do that in corporate,
inside of a comfort.
Like they're not doing that in that way. There's a lot of other underhanded ways, such as like, oh, I got to sell you insurance or an annuity or life insurance or whatever, and you don't even know what my motive is. Versus now I can be like, oh, okay, well, instead of us taking it that route, let's instead look at what you're budgeting, your saving, and your things, and what investment strategy works best for you. And like, you know, so we're able to talk more. And I love real estate, so I'm biased to real estate. I feel like the best way to build wealth.
I agree. I mean, I don't want to say like I'm not, right? I agree. It's not for, but I agree, right? Like everything is a path, right? And I think that's one of the things that I've had to come to is there are some things that work for me. Like some people do not want to deal with tenants. Like they're just like, I don't want it. I don't care for it. Like not my thing.
Not for me. Like they want something more passive. And that's perfectly fine. So I love that. So it's just like everyone, but that's where I'm like big on like trying to help people to find their path. Because just because I love real estate, all of my clients are not into real estate. All of my clients don't go with real estate. Some of them just want the lazy way of stocks. And some of them they want to like invest in real estate stocks or like syndications and things like that, where it's like hands off. They're like, hey, let me get a piece of that pie and that kind of return without having to do none of the day.
Do all the other pieces. Exactly.
So it's just like us finding our niche and what works for us and what's going to like what we're going to actually stick to have.
I think that's right. Like because I remember I had a friend too when I was looking at I have a friend who bought a business. But I have another friend. I mean, we all like have bought some sort of real estate. And so I had a friend and he's always like, why are you guys doing that? Like, just invest in stocks. He was like, I make all of my money from stocks. And we were like, but they're just so boring. I love real estate. Like, I just think houses are beautiful. And and my other friend, like, she loves businesses, right? She loves going in, becoming the CEO, learning the operations. Like that sounds like the worst thing to me. I'm like, I do not want to buy somebody else's business and have to deal with all of that drama. But everybody has their thing, right? And so I think knowing yourself and knowing what is the thing that gets you excited and motivated to get your finances in order. Because for me, a part of it was what I wanted to be able to have for my daughter. It was where I wanted to live, right? It was my vision of what I wanted my life to be like. And I was like, I don't want to wait till I'm 60 to have that life. I
Exactly.
want that life sooner. And so how do I start to put things in place to get to that place a lot faster and to do it in a different way? And sometimes it's all of those things, right? Like I'm actually interested in a lot of different types of investments, but I've sort of said like, okay, where am I going to focus? Where do I want to hone in based on what really gets me excited and motivated?
So real estate got you excited. That's why you went for the triplex. How long did it
Yes.
take you before you got the triplex? Did you just get it last year or?
No. Um, oh, well, actually, well, technically, yes. I think it was like end of 2021.
Okay.
Yeah, like 2021. Yep.
And what state are you in now? Because you said you moved from
Now
Chicago.
I am in DC.
Oh, nice. So you're not too far away from me.
Yeah. Where are you? Actually, I don't even
I'm
know.
in Virginia, but I'm in
Oh,
Virginia.
that's right. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. So I'm in, yeah, right outside of DC in Maryland, Silver Spring.
Awesome. That is lovely. Oh, well, we're gonna have to talk later, see if you know some of my folks that I know up there.
I know, probably.
Yes.
It's small
But
enough space for sure.
it is. So that's lovely. Okay, so that makes a lot more sense also, like to do the numbers to be able to get a triplex because I'm like, I'm thinking triplex in Chicago. One, where does it exist? Because I'm always thinking high rises,
No,
apartments.
yeah. So like, I mean, I think what's great
But
about Chicago is I always say Chicago is I feel like it's a lot like DC because I grew up in this area and then I left and then came back. And I feel like Chicago is like probably like 10 years behind DC. And that like downtown Chicago, right, is all high rises, but the city of Chicago is actually pretty, it spreads across much bigger than DC. DC is like super tiny. So there's actually a lot of neighborhoods that are just starting to sort of turn and shift, right? And so like they always have the joke that you follow where the hipsters are, and that generally becomes the next hot neighborhood. And so like just having lived there for a while and I knew the area, I mean, again, like some of them, some people would say maybe they're not safe. So, if you house hack it and you have to know that you're okay doing that for a little while. But there's, I mean, a ton of these neighborhoods that just like not overnight, but like very quickly, right? You can see the investment, you can see the money.
I would
And
just
so I
think it
think,
would be a lot more expensive there. That's just like my thought. Like it would be a lot more expensive in Chicago than maybe like the Maryland area. Was
oh no, Maryland is extremely
so
expensive. I
it's
mean,
more
that is the
expensive than
biggest
Chicago?
problem is the DC, Maryland area is unbelievably expensive. And mostly because there's not a lot of, I shouldn't say that. I mean, I haven't really lived in Maryland for more like multi-units, but DC is untouchable. Like
Oh yeah.
DC,
But
unbelievably
but is it more
expensive.
expensive? Is the Maryland area more expensive than Chicago?
Oh yes, by far. I mean, I could buy like a mansion in Chicago. Now, granted, it would be in the suburb, but I live in the suburbs, right, of Maryland. But if I lived in the suburbs of Chicago, I mean, you could have like a mansion for the size of like a 3 bedroom in Maryland. Now, it depends on where in Maryland, right? So if you're further out in like Cambridge or maybe like Chesapeake, like if you're like really, really far out, but the closer you get to DC,
The more
the
expensive it is.
more expensive it is, right? And so because I generally want to be somewhat close to DC, like I prefer DC more so than Baltimore. Baltimore is an area though that I think there's some potential to look there. It's just one of those areas that I've always been very wary of because for as long as I have lived, when I grew up in this area, they have been trying to turn Baltimore around. And so I'm just never sure if that's really going to happen. And there's just a lot of like you have to know block by block very well, like where to go in Baltimore. Whereas I know Maryland and I know DC really well. And so one of my other goals is to try to maybe pull some different people to buy a property in DC because DC just generally has a return that is just strong because of the federal government. There's always people coming into the city. The
Definitely.
price, the values generally are always going up. And people are almost always looking for somewhere to live because there's always an influx and outflux of
So
administrations and
did you
federal
do
employees.
Virginia then
I
for
have
your?
not lived in Virginia, no. So I'm
Okay,
mostly
so
just
your
lived in
triplex
DC.
is in Maryland or DC?
No, only in Chicago. I don't have anything in Maryland.
Oh, okay. Oh, so it is in Chicago.
Yeah,
Not
yeah, yeah, yes,
okay.
yes.
I thought it was here in like the DMV area.
No. It's
But it
way,
is.
it's way, way, way cheaper to buy a multi-unit in Chicago than it is here. So I
So you're a
mean,
long distance landlord.
yeah, for now, which is not always great. But yes, yeah. So that is actually a big that is a big shift because
Do
it's
you
easier
like
when
it?
you're close by than it is when you're remote. It depends. I've had some tough tenants, that is for sure. But I mean, for the most part, like you have to have a good handyman, you have to have good people, right, that are easy, that are around, that can help keep things on board. And so for the most part, that's what I've done sort of after moving out of it. But I think I'm not sure if I would do it again. At the time
Gotcha.
it made, right. At the time it made some sense just because, right, like I knew Chicago way better than I knew this area because I just lived there for most of my adult life. And so
Gotcha.
I knew the neighborhoods enough. I had a really great, real estate agent. I knew mortgage people, right? So it was just a lot easier to find something and know if it was a good deal. I think here it'll just take me some time to make sure I understand the neighborhoods as well and can think about where's a good place to buy. But hopefully, maybe DC is the one where I would like to purchase something, but DC is insanely expensive. So I don't know
Oh,
if
you're
that will.
gonna do it. You've
Yeah,
already put your mind to it, so you're gonna do it. So
I
I
think
I
so. We'll
can't wait to
see.
hear about your properties that you've acquired in DC. So
Well,
comment.
thank you. It'll either be a property or a hotel. That's the other thing that's on my sight line. So we'll see.
Ooh, nice
Yes, for
hotel.
sure.
Okay, well,
Yeah, I mean, without sort of saying, so I work for a hospitality company, and so I was talking to, I talked one of the on my podcast, right, the Independent Mom. One of the first guests I had on was my sister, and she does basically wealth management for a large bank. And one of the things she talked about was sort of this owner mentality, and she was laughing because I was saying how I work in hospitality, but my quest has always been how do I own a hotel, right? So I want to learn how do we develop hotels? How do we pick owners? What are some of the criteria, right? And so I think that is an interesting strategy as well, as if there's a space or a thing that you think you may want to own one day, how do you put yourself in a spot where you can learn more, where you are making the relationships, where you can be where the discussions are had? Because otherwise, sometimes, like I said before, otherwise we don't always have access, right? Like someone's not just going to tap you on the shoulder and be like, hey, do you want to contribute to a $5 million pot or that we're trying to put together for a hotel? But so you have to be able to be in those spaces where you can be around owners who might be doing those things. And so I think
yeah,
always being really strategic about where do you want to go and what are you trying to do and how even your job, right, can maybe potentially
yeah.
help you get closer to that.
It can. It can. I used to work for a commercial real estate company, and the
Mm-hmm.
employees, they would end up having the opportunity to get in on those like big deals for like city centers and like multiple properties and things like that. Now they didn't pay you enough for you to really get in there, but
Right,
but at least
exactly.
having a connection where it's like, if
Yeah.
I start making enough money here, I could do that. Obviously, I didn't make enough money there, so I had to go somewhere with
Yeah, I mean it's hard, right?
but
Like I have a
yeah.
friend, she told me about something recently though, where I think the minimum raise was only like $10,000 or $20,000, and I was like, "Are you sure?" Because that is like insanely low. So
Mhm.
there are opportunities, right? If you can
There
find them
are.
and you can put something in, I think that's really important.
Yeah, there were some people that put in like $10,000 on the commercial properties and
Yep.
like, and they would get a check each month, and I would write them their checks each month
Wow.
for what they
Yeah.
would get, even if it was just a few $100s. I mean, like, they were able to get a seat at the table with the big dogs and
Yep.
create wealth for their families. And I think that's just the biggest
It's
thing, is just making
huge.
sure you get a seat and you're able to sit at that table and get a
Yes.
chunk of the pie.
Right.
You ain't
Yep.
gotta own the whole thing.
That's
Like,
right. That's right.
a chunk is enough sometimes. So I love that. I love that. Well, I don't want to steal you all day because I have enjoyed talking to you and talking about finances. I could do it all day. So we're
I
gonna
know,
switch
same.
into our next segment before we close out. So I always ask each guest to tell me a question that they have about finances that they would like for me to cover or to go over. Did you have one in mind right now, or I can give what you have put on your app?
Yeah, I don't remember what I said.
So What you had said, my main area right now is taxes. As I start my
Mm,
business, I want to understand the best tax strategies to be able to build a legacy for my daughter.
yes.
Okay, so I love that. I love taxes, everything tax. But the biggest thing when it comes to taxes is being able to legally minimize
Yes, yes.
how much you owe Uncle Sam. And so the you can't really do that with a W-2. You have to do that
Hmm.
through businesses or investments. And the biggest way is going to be able to have like majority of your source of income. It can come from a passive source so that you can benefit from the 0, 15, 20 taxes instead of, it going up to the like 30 something odd
Yep.
percent
Yep.
that we get on regular wages, but like on real estate or stock market investments,
Hmm.
we can pay nothing or 15 or 20%. So that's one of the benefits of having more passive income. Another way is being able to have more deductions and things that you can
Hmm.
write off as a business owner that you can't write off as an everyday person.
Yeah.
So it doesn't matter if you're using your phone for your job, you don't get to use that as a write-off on your
That's
taxes.
true. Yeah.
But if you use your phone for your business, you do get to write that off. You get to write off your phone costs in your phone bill, like
Mm.
50% or however much the percentage is that you're using it for business versus personal. So being able to look at some of those everyday things that we can't normally deduct that are normal expenses for us, how we can deduct those, such as like having a home office,
Yeah.
having that as a deduction, being able to have vehicles. For some people, they are able to depreciate their vehicles because they're going around meeting with clients in these vehicles. And so that could be a very big deduction. You have to have a
Mm-hmm.
car anyway. That's not to say to go get
Right,
an
right.
expensive car because now I get a deduction. That's
Right.
not what I'm saying. Because a lot of people are like,
Right.
oh, that BMW, or oh, I know a Rolls Royce is
I
in my
know.
future. Like, and it's like, calm down. Like, just
You still have to afford it. Yeah, exactly.
yes. Because I hate when people look at it like, oh, I'm gonna be able to get a tax deduction for this. You're gonna write off 100% of the
Right,
rest of it.
exactly.
Like you spent $100,000 to get a $30,000 write off.
Mhm.
Like
Yeah, it's not equaling
that's
out.
not a good idea. So,
Yes, that's fair. Totally.
yeah. So, but also just being able to utilize that. So there's just a lot of tax advantages that come from us having businesses, real estate. Real estate is the biggest one with how we can depreciate it and
Hmm.
how we can take that, because depreciation is not a real expense that
Right. Yeah.
we have. So it doesn't actually reduce the amount in our bank accounts, but it reduces our tax liability over.
Right. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so that's why I love real estate, because it's so powerful. Like with stocks, whatever you get, you can go ahead and
Yep.
pay
Yep.
less taxes on it. But with real estate, on your income, you get to have the lower rates, but also on your expenses, you really get to reduce a whole lot of tax liability that
Hmm.
things
Hmm.
that aren't necessarily paper losses, or there are
Yeah.
paper losses that aren't necessarily like actual hard loss.
Actual loss. Yeah. Yes.
So that is going to be the best way to me. That's why I am a real estate junkie, and I swear by it, because I just feel like as long as we figure out the strategic way to do about it, as with anything, we can make mistakes. We can do
Yeah,
things
that's
wrong,
fair.
and we can wind up in a bad predicament. But there's a lot of people that got rich from 2008.
Oh
There's a
yeah, for
lot of people that
sure.
like
If I had been buying in 2008 instead
yeah,
of having to sell, that would have been, yeah. And also too, like I hadn't planned to, I mean, I had planned to go to business school, but when I bought the property, I wasn't thinking about like, oh, maybe I'll go to business school. And so when I had to leave and I was like, ooh, what do I do? But yeah, I mean, honestly, I think I would have been fine if I wasn't a condo, if I had just bought a house. So that's
yeah.
always my like number one, buy
I
a
can't
property,
stand condos.
do not
I
buy a
don't like
condo.
condos, and I don't like homeowner associations.
Yeah.
You guys are really just, I'm paying you to be a thorn in my side. I'll pass.
Yes, totally, totally.
So that's just the other thing to think of. But yeah, that's all I have about the tax part. Very quickly, this episode is sponsored by the Financial Freedom Plan, where I help you to create your custom financial plan to reach your dream goals and live your dream life daily. If you're interested, feel free to book a free financial breakthrough call at bdsmithfinancial.com/work with me, or just go to bdsmithfinancial.com and click one of the many schedule a call buttons, and it'll take you where you need to go. So Thank you so much for being
Thank
here.
you.
I appreciated you. Do you have anything that you want to give to the audience for how they can connect with you or stay in touch? You have an amazing podcast that I was,
Yes,
able to
you
get a
were
guest
on.
on.
Yes, definitely. So please listen into the Independent Mom podcast on all podcast platforms. And then also you can find me on Instagram at the same name, The Independent Mom. And so that's where I'll share all my gems and goodies, and hopefully a few things coming up soon that I'll be launching. So please get connected.
Yes, I love it. I love it. Well, thank you guys so much for tuning in. We'll be back next week.